said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear. Welcome back to Flyover State of Fear. We got a great guest for you. It's been a while. We got Anthony Brownlee, author and producer of the great documentary Fredheads. How are you, Anthony?
I'm awesome. Glad to be here.
Yeah. I was joking, and obviously we have Brian here. I was joking beforehand. We've had your peers on Deandra and Paige from Fredheads, and I think on this show we're collecting you guys like Infinity Stones at this point. We're like, I'm gonna watch that documentary. Go, I talked to them. So really, really happy you're here.
He's just
today.
angling to get interviewed. He wants to be a talking head in whatever the next documentary is. He's
Yeah.
like, that shit happens. I'm gonna be in it. I'm in that.
Yeah, I'll be like, I've been to one con, and
Oh,
I
only
qualify.
one?
Yeah, I started going since this horror journey started about 4 years, or it's always there, but the podcasting 4 years ago, I went to Monster Mania in Cherry Hill this year. This past year. So,
I've only ever been to the I think it's the Maryland show. Hunt. Oh, can't remember the city, but it was the one in Maryland. I think it was that they have it. That's the only Monster Mania that I've been to. I haven't been to the one in Cherry.
It was cool. It was cool. I have one big regret. I did not go up and get the autograph of Heather Langenkamp when she was there. And
yes.
It was like I left that day and I was like, you fucked up, because I went there very tight on a budget and I stuck to it, but then I was like, no, you're dumb. You're so dumb.
I mean, it's like no shade. Like cons are expensive. There's
no,
like
it was.
You start racking up autographs.
It was overthinking.
You better brought your wallet. Like
I was overthinking my first con experience to the point where I didn't shut down, but I was like, no, I'm going to do this and this, and like it doesn't count if the only person you met and talked to is Lloyd Kaufman, because he's free.
Oh yeah, he's always at the shows.
You
can always rely on Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah, my friend though got Keith David, but
nice.
Anyway, enough about myself and my failed con experience. I'll get back. I'll do it again. Anthony, have you been so we like to start off like, have you been watching anything recently, or anything kind of shout out of recent? Same with you, Brian.
I did. There's actually a pretty new release on Amazon that I got hip to. Dark Harvest, based on a book, apparently. But anyway, kind of a fun little throwback, horror curse. It's got a cool monster in it. It's kind of a small town corn monster kind of thing, a cornfield monster kind of vibe to it.
That's fun.
Yeah. And I watched Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, which I had not seen as an adult. And it was great. Elvira's like, what a performer. Like, she's just got so much charisma. You're just like, she just kills it. Like
that's on Shudder, right? I feel like I always see that thumbnail.
I don't remember where I watched it now. Maybe Amazon. I can't remember where I watched it.
Could be Tubi. Tubi has a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it's had to be a couple different places. But either way, just like I said, I hadn't seen it, and I'll tell you what, I didn't remember that she did the full burlesque show at the end. I was like, wow. maybe they didn't let me see this part. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe somebody like shielded me from this element of it, because I did not remember that. But I was not no complaints. Great movie.
No, it's fun. Yeah, for me, I only know I'm only on Elvira, like interstitials here or there. No sort of
Yeah,
it's like,
like
oh
I
yeah,
said,
that's her. Yeah,
I
more
knew
from The
she had a movie, and
Simpsons.
I knew like tacitly I'd seen it somewhere in the past, but I had no like real. Once I started watching, I was like, oh yeah, I have no memory of this. None of this like strengthening chords.
Like it's
It may
shameful of
have well been a first watch.
yeah. It's shameful. I'm about to be like, oh, the biggest experiences is her cameos on The Simpsons.
Well,
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's
uh,
okay.
Or
However, you
Pee Wee's Big
reach.
Adventure cameo.
yeah, they okay. The more you hear that too. Anthony, anything you've kind of seen recently or revisited that
I feel like
you've
I'm revisiting a lot more than I have watching newer films. Well, I would say the newest film I watched was Suitable Flesh.
we just covered
Uh,
that.
We
Great
did
oh
an
fun.
yeah,
episode on that.
that one was wild. I mean, it was a crazy like sort of a different take on the possession movie, where it's like at will the person or this entity
It
or whatever it was could just possess anybody with that
yeah,
little chant.
and if you're not like a familiar like myself, I was like not putting two and two together that it was a Stuart Gordon like homage and everything.
Hmm.
So, and I know the name is Suitable Flesh, but when we hit play, it was like, oh my god, this is so erotic. And like, yeah, that's the point. But if you don't know, like,
Yeah,
it was pretty great though.
yeah. I
Yeah,
really dug it. It had a lot of really good scenes, and like it really kept my interest. Like I really was just like, man, like what's gonna happen next? I mean, are they gonna get rid of this thing, or is it just like gonna just start, collecting as many bodies as it can, or it was
it
just
felt like it was going that way. It had
wild.
great possession, but also like body swap movie. It did a lot of different
Sure.
things. So that's funny. Glad you mentioned it. We probably whenever this is the
Great
episode right
plug. By the
before it.
time this comes out, that'll
Yeah.
probably be up. So check that episode out, everybody.
Oh, nice.
Suitable Flesh. Thanks for the
But
plug.
no, that's great. I've been revisiting a lot of stuff myself too. In 2024, my quest to just watch Nicole Kidman movies for some odd reason. It's not really what I'm doing, but it just seems to be like, oh, another one. Not quite horror, but that Stepford Wives remake. I don't know how that's not in the camp classic
Oh,
category. Like it was so like it's bad, but I was like I could see it getting rediscovered for midnight screenings
It's
and everything.
that's
hmm.
got Bette Midler and John Lovitz as the
Yeah,
neighbors, right?
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'd
There's some
watch it for that.
no,
I'll watch it for that right
I
there.
watched it on Canopy. There's like there were some like moment because I remember seeing it as a kid in that like 12 or whatever, and there was some truly it was like yeah with the Bette Midler and the Glenn Close and all. I'm like, oh, this should be like in your Hairspray camp and
Yeah.
everything and loved and revered and
Uh,
you know but anyway, I know that's like horror adjacent, so I don't want to too much, but ton of fun. I mean,
this,
bad but fun.
there's always a lot of subgenres that have those kind of like random fun. But I mean, I honestly haven't seen that Nicole Kidman one. I mean, I know about it.
Hmm.
I saw, I've seen the original one,
Yeah,
from the
Oh
what was
yeah,
it? Was
obviously.
that that was the '70s, right?
believe
And I think
so.
that's part
Yeah,
of what happened too.
yeah.
Is like it probably what's keeping it from being remembered as a camp, a modern kind of camp movie is just that it's overshadowed. Like
Oh no,
there were so many remakes, and you really had to be something special to kind of break through in this recent kind of wash of remakes over the last 10 years or whatever. And only like the very few of them like made it to the next level, and
I,
a lot of stuff just
I,
gets immediately forgotten, even though they're not even that bad.
I
They're
want to
just
be
kind of
clear.
not good enough.
It's not great. It was
No,
just fun.
sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, that is just not being like, wow, Joe said this was good, and you put it on, you're like, this is bad and kind of offensive. It's 2003. But anyway, yeah, yeah, I haven't no other real horror stuff in there. I went to go give Beau is Afraid a chance and um just got distracted and I was like, I don't have the 3 hours, so
I watched that.
I'm gonna
I've been watching a lot of 3 hour movies. I watched Oppenheimer. I
mm,
watched that. I watched Bo's Afraid.
I'm gonna watch Beau is
I'm finally
Afraid.
gonna watch The
Yeah.
Irishman. I decided I'm finally gonna watch The Irishman. I've never seen The Irishman.
I gotta watch Oppenheimer. That's one I still gotta catch. Cause I like Cillian Murphy, but I just knew it was a long movie, and I just hadn't gotten
It
around
is
to
a
watching it.
very long movie of men talking to each other.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think
basically all it is. It's a lot of different rooms
I thought it
where
was really.
guys talk at each other.
I thought it was really good.
Not bad, it's good. But
I don't think this is a great endorsement of it. What I'm about to say is, it really, and same with Killers of the Flower Moon, it really benefited that I saw them in the theaters because you had to watch. I think that at home watch, at least for myself, would be a lot more.
see, I made a concerted effort to actually me and my son watched Oppenheimer, and we both like put the phones in the other room, like did not have them, because for that same exact reason I was like, I'm gonna treat this like a
You'll see
theatrical
it.
experience. This is
So,
an
it's
Oscar
good.
nom, this is Oscar nominated, whatever. This is the big movie.
It's gonna
I'm
win
gonna
Best
watch
Picture.
it. You know,
It's gonna win Best
Probably.
Picture.
I didn't like it as much as I like Killers of the Flower Moon. I'll tell you that.
Yes, I'm there too. So anyway, Anthony, on this show, one of the big things I love to learn about my guests are origin story, and that could be answered however you want, and mainly the root is, what got you into horror? What is your origin?
We'll put you on the path. To being a producer of horror documentaries. That's a person who loves,
right,
you
but
know what
also,
I mean? You don't produce horror documentaries without like a deep, abiding love for horror.
but also like writing.
yes.
You're like the horror author and and all of that. So writing them in such a more, I think, intimate connection to this genre. So, tell us, please.
Well, that can be circled back to one thing in general, which is A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Welcome to the club.
Everything circles back to A Nightmare on Elm Street for me. I was 5 years old when I saw it. I was at my cousin's house, and uh, we were kids growing up in the '90s, so I wasn't around to see it in theaters in the
Sure.
'80s, and have that awesome experience like that. It was a recorded VHS off of HBO. I'm talking about old school HBO, where the sign comes down from the sky, and all the theme music and all this
Feature
fantastic
presentation.
feature presentation. And it also lets you that it would only be showing that movie at night only. I guess back then it was just too risque to show in the daytime. But that was my introduction to it, which I actually have that tape still. It's not mine. My cousin let me borrow it when I was probably like 8, and that hasn't been returned for like 30 years. So
that's incredible. I mean, that's yours. That's
just
yours
keeping
now.
it safe for you,
mine.
just
It's
holding on to it.
Um, that's incredible though. That you had it on that recording and you got it on the HBO special, because I always felt that when I watched those things on HBO at that age or around then, it felt like different. You were like, "Ooh, this is special." It's the presentation. It's not ripped from like WB,
right?
Sunday movie afternoon, and
right. Everything cut, and it's the whole kind of shebang. And this was like pre remastered, Nightmare on Elm Street, so it was very still had that grainy look. The colors weren't, so tight, and it was just. And that's how I watched it. And that's how I was used to it. And I still remember that first time that I watched it. It scared me so bad. I had never been scared by a movie. Honestly, the first horror thing I ever remember watching was like Michael Jackson's Thriller. That was just creepy.
I
Like,
am scary.
right?
End.
I mean, him turning into the werecat, that was like, to me, the scariest part, more than the zombies, just because it was right in your face. You just saw him. The kid, you're just thinking like, in a full moon, I'm going to turn into a werecat now, because it happened to him.
It happened to Michael. It could happen to anyone else.
Right, but Nightmare hits
I always
on a
wish
totally
werecats
different
were a bigger
level.
thing.
I mean, especially that one. That one was terrifying. Like,
so that's what we're talking about today, Nightmare. And my big note every time I watch it is, it's the only one, for how goofy their moments in and of it, that has the like generally terrifying at minimum imagery and things in it, and it's still today. It works. I this last fall, they were like there was like a drive-in movie where the actors, come around and scare you, and it's fun. And we saw Trick or Treat, and we teed it up with some other friends to see Nightmare on Elm Street. And my wife was going to come. She's terrified of horror movies, but dating me or married to me and dating me, like she learned to handle it or wants to be, with the FOMO, I'll go with the party. So I was like,
it's
all
going to
right.
be a fun experience. This isn't just
And
going to a movie.
I mean,
this is like you're going to miss out on something if you don't go to this.
And I mean, like, I have Freddy shit everywhere, so I go, Laura, it's really it's really goofy. There's a few scenes. I'll tell you when to, look away. And but I teed her up with, well, let's watch behind the scenes stuff, right? I was like, let's watch that movies that made us on Netflix. That's really,
okay.
That's just really palatable. That's not like the Never Sleep Again doc where it's,
yeah.
really. So she watches it and she goes, I can't. I'm not going. She goes, that scared me even more seeing those. And I said, oh, okay. So it still works. So my point, long-winded way, it still works for, the movies still works completely.
They have those, they do those like Dateline style photos of Wes Craven though, where he's all like, and they like zoom in kind of slowly on him. Which I could get her. I could see it.
Yeah. No, it was fun. And then oddly enough, I ended up being sick that day, so the both of us didn't go to that drive-in, and I was like, God damn it.
Oh, dang.
Yeah,
you missed out too? That's brutal.
Yeah, but we'll do it again next year. But Persevere. You know what? The website used the thumbnail from him on the Goldbergs, and I wanted to make a public complaint, being like, it's the wrong thumbnail. I'm such a nerd that I recognize.
It's not even from the movie.
But no. So going back to as a kid, yeah, I don't know. For me, I know there's something very what in the movie, particularly other than being scared, did like brought that out of you? Because I remember learning about Freddy Krueger as an urban legend almost from my neighbors trying to scare us. Of like, here's the boiler room and this, that, before I even saw a clip of the movie, right? They were just retelling a movie they saw.
But were they selling it to you as like a real thing?
Yeah. Nice. So I thought it was a real thing.
God bless neighborhood kids, right? You know what I mean? They will just like damage your psyche at the drop of a hat. They don't care.
So, So my point was like, was there anything like in specific of that or later on? Because I know you said you were around 5 when you watched it, so it's more just like, you loved it to hear there.
I really, because before that, I mean, I'd heard about Freddy at that time, because around the time that I watched it, I think Freddy's Dead had like just come out not too long before that.
Okay.
If I'm remembering right. And so I knew that the name Freddy Krueger, people would, say his name, or you might see an image of him like, with the knives, maybe on TV or something. But at that point, he was MTV Freddy. And I had and it was like just little small hints here and there. So I had, nothing really to compare it to. So then when we sat down and watched part 1, there was nothing, funny or jokey about, this Freddy. This is the Wes Craven Freddy, the Freddy that was more in the shadows, the one that didn't talk as much, the one you didn't see as much. And actually appreciate that Freddy more, because there's something about him being so much in that darkness and in those nightmares that just made him so terrifying that you didn't get too much of him, because we didn't know anything about him. He was just this man, this burnt man with these knives for fingers, and the dreams of these teenagers. And it's like, where did he come from? Like, what is he doing? And he's just in these shadows. And it was specifically the alley scene that got me.
When he chases Tina?
That is the scene as a 5-year-old that terrified me to my core. I mean, literally, it was from start to finish. So basically, her in the bedroom, and him throwing the little pebbles, and then the last one is like a tooth, and Then she's in the backyard. Somebody there, and he's just whispering her name, and she makes it to the alley, and he turns around, and then his arms are just stretched out, and then he's going in and out of the shadows, like you just see a smile, then he'd be in the shadows, then partially a smile, then he's in the shadows again. It was just very, like, like that part just it just really caught me. And
Sure.
it's anytime I would have a nightmare about a Nightmare on Elm Street as a kid, and I don't really get to have nightmares now. I'm pretty desensitized to horror at this point. But when I
Yeah.
randomly do just have a nightmare about a Nightmare on Elm Street, it's some variation of the alley scene. It's like no
Okay.
matter what, some variation, and that part just had a huge impact on me. That's what kind of reeled me in, scene wise, and like being introduced to Freddy wise, that scene. But really, it was Nancy Thompson that kept me coming back to the actual film.
Sure. Yeah. No. It's incredible. So yeah, we're just gonna
That's
go
such
right
a
into
visceral fear, right? Like
yeah.
something that a child, even a small child of 5 years old, can relate to is being chased, right? You know what I mean? That's something that you do to kids, even in play. But and a kid understands running away from something scary. So and then to take it to the next level and have it be an actual nightmare demon, obviously,
And
is a whole nother thing. But even at the basest level, that imagery of someone coming after you and you have to get away, and they're bigger than you and they're stronger than you and they're faster than you, and that just speaks to everybody. That's like instinct shit.
Yeah, and he was just scary looking. I mean, that first makeup, sort of special effects makeup they had on him in that first film, and I'd say, obviously the second film was, but that first film, it was just, he kind of had that slimy look, like that
gooey, yeah,
real burnt
We
look.
talked about that with Deandra, the
know,
gooiness and the real burn victim.
yeah, like
of
real
it.
burnt.
Yeah.
Because later on in the, later sequels, 5 and 6, it was more of a mask.
It's
more of a mask look. So, but those early scenes, he just looked really just burnt and just really off, and it was just skeletal, and just that alone. And like I said, you would only get those hints of him, so you would. A lot of times Robert would smile, and it's like you would see that smile on his face and his eyes more, and it was just like all that connected to that face.
There's that one shot in the you're talking about all in the shadows, and he smiles with his eyes, and thing is when he's cutting his fingers off, and he looks so
yes. And he's just looking at her, and looking at his fingers, and looking at her, and it was just kind of like this.
You like this?
Yeah,
the kind of gleeful, I know this is nasty and you hate it. It's so fun. He was just having such a good time while being so scary,
And that's why it's always incredible that they were by 2, they were like, yeah, maybe we don't need to pay Robert Englund, and that we immediately was a mistake, and we're happy it never went there. But
they were so used to being the killer being replaceable. The killer had always been a person in a mask who just didn't expressionless. From Halloween's and the Friday the 13th had been churning out sequels, and you could swap out a stuntman in those anywhere, but you can't do that with Robert Englund because he's bringing so much to it.
Yeah,
so much personality.
It's amazing. I just watched his doc recently. That was really good.
He had one. It released pretty recently. It's pretty new, right?
Hollywood Nightmare, Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, I think it's called.
I keep forgetting about it.
Really good nightmare doc, or not really about Robert, but a nightmare doc. But yeah, it's so funny. For a while, I would really say a lot of people's horror origins and all that. There's a few that are really common, especially when people grew up in nightmares, right in the pack there. Just you're like, oh yeah, that, and then puts you on whatever journey you're on, and it relates back, and it also helps. It's we're going to talk further about the movie in this. It's still such a strong movie. It's not one of those. Yes, like I said, there's moments here or there, and it's more of you just love them now because they're in the movie. But it's a horror classic, not just a classic villain.
Yeah. Just a classic. I mean, the tale, just the Nightmare on Elm Street tale. Just that film itself is just... So strong.
You brought up one really, I think, important part of that tale, and kind of still on your origin stuff, is you brought up Nancy, and I think that's also so important to that first movie, especially because you were relating to it as a kid, and you know, it's also one where she learns to fight back and like give the. I know it's a poor comparison here of like what she goes for now, but I could see it being really appealing as a kid. Is like the booby trapped house at the end, and then seeing how like successful much people love something like the easy bait is to say it's like Home Alone, right? Like, or
Yeah.
Home Alone's like a
Or Home
nightmare.
Line, yeah, is like
Yeah,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
is, but I could see that the same parallels of you saying when like no, but Nancy keeps me coming back to the movie and the franchise. I think is
Hmm.
kind of what you were just saying, and it's there. It's a
Oh
it's a
yeah.
it's a more fun story when you watch it. Uh, for me later when with more maturity, be like, oh, I'm watching it for this final girl who's kicking ass and kicking back and trying to fight back than just here's the fun monster that's scaring me. And there's multiple things going on there with that. So
And then she gets, you get basically your Nancy trilogy, which is like
Hmm.
three of the strongest movies in the franchise too.
oh,
You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I
There's things I love
was like,
about all of them, except maybe Freddy's Dead. But there's things I love about
it's
all of them, but the Nancy trilogy
Yeah,
it
I
stands
agree.
tall over
Hmm.
over
I
the whole
I
franchise.
bought it's a bootleg, but the Nancy cut
Oh,
Oh, I know
trilogy.
really?
what you're talking
Yeah, I
about.
have
Yeah.
it. It ain't. I rather just watch the three movies. Put it that way.
Sure,
It's the
sure.
edit of the trial from Freddy's Nightmares to
Oh, they
start.
have
I
that
believe they
too.
put it
Oh,
in there,
Oh
wow.
wow.
and then it's just a Nightmare, and I'm like there's the first. It's just the full cut of the first movie.
Yeah.
I think the ending's chopped off of the car driving away. I only put this on once. Then they clip in uh
The Dream Warrior
Dream
stuff, right?
Warriors up until she passes, and then it fades right into New Nightmare. So it's like 2.5 movies
Oh wow.
mashed. Like I bet you
That's
there's
weird.
other
That's
edit.
so weird.
I bet you there's other edits that are like you know um that maybe are a little more cut up. But that one, I was like, yeah, whatever. I remember I was like, I have $20. I'll order it, and I gotta have the Blu-ray, and it's like never before seen footage clipped in, and it's like maybe there's a deleted scene they added somewhere, but don't honestly don't waste your time and money for the fanned edit, Nancy. But I almost threw it on today because I couldn't find my box set briefly. And I was like, well, it's the full movie basically, and I've seen it a billion times. We could talk about it in our sleep. Um, yeah, but so no, we'll just go right to it. We're talking about Nightmare, and uh, I'm not really so usually Anthony on this show. I do like to read the like synopsis from what we Google just to see if it's accurate. It's a blind read. Yeah, then we'll just kind of break down some of our favorite parts of the movie and some things. I have some questions for you, as a Nightmare aficionado. So in Wes Craven's classic slasher film, several Midwestern teenagers fall prey to Freddy Krueger, a disfigured midnight mangler who preys on the teenagers in their dreams, which in turn kills them in reality. After investigating the phenom, Nancy begins to suspect that a dark secret kept by her and her friend's parents may the key to unraveling. My eyes are drying up. Unraveling, but can Nancy and her boyfriend Glenn solve the puzzle before it's too late? That's a pretty good description.
That's almost too good for
It's too
Google.
good.
It's
Yeah.
because, and you know why? It's because, like we talked about, Nightmare is such a covered and beloved that even Google can put together a
You
good
know the story.
even they can manage
Um,
a decent
my They mentioned in the description, though, Midwestern. Before this, I did ask that I had some question for you, Ohio men.
Well, he said did they say a Midwestern Mangler?
They said a
Midwestern Mangler. That was hilarious.
I like that. I like the alliteration. Is that like a nod to the Mangler, which is another Robert Englund movie?
Midnight Mangler.
Midnight Mangler.
Not the Springwood Slasher.
As opposed to the Springwood Slasher.
Because also a thing I love in the original is he's Fred Krueger. No one's ever saying Freddy. I don't think it's uttered once.
Well, she does call him Freddy at the end when she's like, when he's coming up out of the bed, and she's like, "I know you're there, Freddy."
Okay, you're
kind of
right.
like, but mostly in the first one they just call him Fred Krueger, and then in the later sequels he's mostly always just called Freddy as opposed.
Yeah, then it becomes Freddy. You know, it's Freddy's Revenge. But so Fred Krueger. But my question for the Ohio boys is, at one point, earthquakes. She was like, I thought it was just earthquakes are mentioned. How frequent I'm on the East Coast myself.
Sorry, no earthquakes in Ohio.
Yeah, I googled it. I knew that.
Zero.
It's like the Google
answer. I've actually heard we've gotten some, but they're like 20. So small that they hardly register. They say some people can feel them sometimes, but I personally have never, and I've lived in Ohio.
I think those people are liars.
It's like in New Jersey. Like I think they got I think we got like an earthquake like 3 years ago during like all those freak things, but it was still like there's no earthquakes in New Jersey.
Yeah, there's never been one that like registered that I could ever feel in my 40 plus years on this planet.
And I've always like kind of been jealous that y'all. I said I haven't felt anything. Like you guys just think y'all kind of felt it a little bit, and I'm like I didn't feel a thing.
I feel like to us, people like in this area of the country, or like earthquakes, are the same thing as like when you're a kid. Like, oh, why? I haven't experienced one. It's like quicksand. You're like,
yeah,
you should be afraid of it everywhere. You should always be afraid. And then on the West Coast, they're like, no. We get them too often. You don't.
Right. Well, I think it's really because I always feel like Wes Craven decided to make it Midwestern like at the last minute. I mean, to talk about earthquakes. I mean, and then it's obvious that they're in California. Like the license plates say California. And then there's a cut scene where Nancy and Glenn are on the bridge.
Yep.
And,
that's like
I know that scene.
She said, he asked her where she found the book. She's like, I found this neat survivor's bookstore in Ventura, and like, there's no Ventura, Ohio. So.
Oh, that's a great.
Yeah, Ventura, California.
That's so funny.
Oh, you're definitely right. Though they filmed it. It would just be like it's California. It's this, and the last minute, someone was like.
Let's
nope,
make it
you're in Ohio. It's more relatable.
Well, they wanted to make the idea of Nightmare on Elm Street, and they kind of touch on it in other movies too. Is that Elm Street could be anywhere? It's supposed to be any town USA, but California doesn't feel like any town USA to most people. Like when they're thinking of same thing with the Haddonfield. The idea of that. It's like
small town in Illinois, Ohio, which could be anywhere in Illinois.
Right. And most people don't even know where that is. They're just like, oh, what's that? That got fields there or something? They don't care. They're like, I think, honestly, a lot of people, they probably think Ohio and Iowa are close to each other. Like, if you ask a lot of people, I bet they would be like, yeah, they're probably close.
Ask me like 14 years ago, 13, I'd be like, yeah. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Honestly, I don't blame them for not knowing. They shouldn't. Why bother? There's too much stuff you can't remember everything.
Right. And if you look at where Springwood is on the map, it's like when they kind of like randomly show like Springwood and Nightmare, it's actually pretty close to you, Brian. It's kind of like right where Delaware is.
Okay, yeah. Like a little north of Columbus, maybe.
Yeah, and I always thought that was hilarious. I was like, wow, like just to imagine like Springwood, Ohio, being like close, like pretty much a suburb of Columbus.
I'm gonna drive up there.
If you find like
don't they do like a canal? Is it Freddy's Dead? They do like a computerized map or something of it.
Yeah, at the beginning.
At the beginning.
And like right if you look at where it is on the map, that's pretty much like right where Delaware, Ohio is.
That's so hilarious.
I always
but
thought that was pretty funny.
yeah. So we're in Springwood, Ohio, and you kind of already mentioned earlier, so I don't want to go into. The movie goes through though. You get this amazing sequence of opening. You know, he's building his glove, and it's like not Super 8, but like like 30 millimeter kind of shot. Like it looks different than the rest of the movie, and then we get right.
It's a pretty tight shot too. It's like very close.
Yeah.
And we get right into Tina's. And it's him pre-disfigured too, which I not picked up on. I've always noticed, but I put in that note today of like it's an interesting choice to see the man making the glove, but then we're just going to see the rest of the movie as as the demon.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get right into that amazing Tina dream.
Oh yeah, and he's just lurking. Like you can catch him in certain spots, just walking around. Like she's up at the top, and you just see him at the bottom, just like moving around and just laughing.
The goat.
And oh yeah, and then the goat, and because I said that. Well, going back just a little bit to where like him building that glove. One of the things that used to scare me as a kid too, when he's just building that glove, and you just hear him going.
Yeah, I would just say that voiceover.
That raspy, just breathing, because he's been burnt, so his lungs aren't clear, so he's got that raspy, just horsey like breath, and it was just like that used to, as a kid, that used to just like give me the chills, just the sound of that. I don't know, just something about that being in the dark, and you're not really seeing his face, so you're not really sure like who exactly is building this glove, because at that point you haven't seen him at all. All you see is his hands.
No,
it's just like, who is this?
We build a great the movie. Just, I mean, that's Wes Craven, right? This is
right.
He builds this great pace story. It's one thing I'm always astonished when I watch it, and like when I watch it like this, where more paying attention than most, is not a scene's wasted. So we get right to there. Then we get right to the kids casually talking about their dreams. And one thing I like to almost watch, seen a million times, is it's coming off you guys is, Glenn playing as, later on I'm like, oh, he's been having these dreams, but playing as, it's stupid. I've never had these dreams. Why are you talking about that? And,
I love the look. They just give you that little cut to Johnny Depp when the girls are talking. And he just kind of like, when she says the old man in the red and green sweater, he immediately perks up. And he knows exactly what they're talking about. Like, he's seen it, but he never, he doesn't like come clean with it right away.
Yeah, and it's such a good notice. And there's other things going on with like, so like Wes Craven's background, right? He wanted to be I think a minister, a priest, and all of that, or something with religion, I believe, and was raised by very religious parents. And immediately these themes of like religion and dealing with that and dreams are completely thrown into the movie. But I also love how they're never fully realized too. So like something like the goat, not just creepy imagery, her taking the cross, I am your God, like I'm your God. I just want to say I'm not a religious person, but it's interesting to see in the context of the movie and what they were framing for. And I was kind of wondering.
Well, it feels dreamlike too. It feels scattered, like a dream does. Like you don't always get, you get pieces, and they're like, you know what I mean. You're kind of like trying to figure out what's going on. And I feel like elements of that.
So, say, have you guys ever, noticed or thought about that aspect of this movie?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. Because with Wes is always very specific, or he was always very specific when he did his films. Like everything means something, and
he's deliberate.
Right? Yeah, super deliberate, and it's part of the reason. Because I just did another podcast not too long ago, and the host wanted to kind of question my take on Nightmare, because I actually don't consider Nightmare on Elm Street as a slasher movie. And I've said that many a times in like Twitter when somebody's asked me, they ask, "What's your favorite slasher?" and I would name another. I thought you loved Nightmare. I said I do, but I don't consider it a slasher.
Okay, I need to know why.
I think it's pretty straightforward. It's supernatural horror. It's not. just because he uses blades doesn't mean he's a slasher.
Right. See, and I consider it a fantasy horror film, and like how I say, almost kind of like a parable, because and like how it actually kind of goes back to what you said, Joe, because of Wes's his background and with religion and such. Like it's literally what the parents have done. Their sins have now fallen down to the children. I
Yeah,
mean, that's purely biblical, and there's something more visceral about that because Freddy isn't just some guy who just pops up out of the bushes or it's like stalking you like while you're walking on the street.
sure.
He's literally like up here. It's very psychological and mental because you have to sleep, and that's what makes him more terrifying to me because you can run from Michael. You can obviously not go to Camp Crystal Lake and not be attacked by Jason,
I
but at some point you're going to succumb to sleep.
I
And
think you're selling me on this idea. So we like it's very reminiscent of another one of my favorites too. I think I'm sure I've called him a slasher. It's like how it's like Candyman's not so much of a slasher to me, is more of like you summon
oh
him.
yeah,
But it's
I've never considered Candyman a slasher either. I
but
don't
it
consider
like
that a slasher.
there's a true Freddy parallel, and I think
Hmm.
I'm sure on Twitter somebody say my favorite top 5 slasher, and it goes like you know Freddy, Candyman, Chucky,
Yeah,
Michael, right? And
right.
I'm calling them that, but I think your explanation is it's a good realization of that, and maybe on this show and this show only, you'll find where we called Terminator as a pure slasher movie, and we talked about it because that's what it is. Or at least that's how it's shot and filmed, and
Mhm.
he shows up. And now I'm having, at least in Nightmare 1, Freddy is not it's mythical. It's right. This like
Yeah,
you saying the
it's
sins of our the sins of our parents are bestowed upon us, and that is literally this movie.
yeah. That's
They are
as far as
literally
look at it
dealing
as
with
that.
generational trauma. Like
Right,
that's what they're
right.
up to.
That's literally what it is. And see, because I consider Part One and New Nightmare my favorite films of all time. It usually can't be one or the other for me. And
Mm.
just like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I definitely don't consider that a slasher
No,
film.
that
Oh,
I would
No.
tell you
that
that's far from.
is yeah, and it's like it's just something about that's why like what Brian said, like that Nancy trilogy, because Wes had his hands in each one of those particular films, so you can
Mm.
tell Wes's touch as opposed to the other sequels. I mean, which I love. I love all of the movies. Like it's my favorite franchise, but which ones that Wes touched because it kind of had that magic that only he could kind of produce. And even though they obviously with Nightmare 3 they did a lot of tweaking and stuff that they Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell kind of did a lot of things to Wes's original script, well, Wes and Bruce's original script
Hmm.
that but it still had that touch, that Wes Craven touch, and he was just so good with all those details, no matter how minor, you know, just those certain, like, Johnny's that certain look when he just looks up. I mean, everything said it right. He didn't have to say, "Oh, I've been having a dream too." To us as
No,
the audience, we know,
it's
you
played
know,
as such a important part, and like we're it's nice when you have and they're far and few between, these art horror filmmakers who I think Wes Craven was, uh, doing genre pictures, right? And it adds to it, and that's why they're classics, and that's why they're considered classics. It's
never smart, smart
like
movies. This isn't like
like
me,
Brian.
one of the ones that kind of goofy. We're just I'm gonna just hang back and just watch all these teenagers get killed. It's like no, like his movies is like you want the teenagers to live. Like you
Mhm.
are rooting for the good guys. Later on it became about more
It's silly.
Freddy and like his, but like in those early films, like to me, like the first one was about Nancy. It's about her journey and like watching
Mhm.
her go through all this, and you literally watch how strong she becomes in that 90 minutes of that film. You watch basically that film just turn into a complete circle, and to the point where she's going. That's what I love about her. She's going after Freddy. She's not a girl in a horror film that just happened to survive the last 15 minutes, like running and screaming, she made sure she survived.
Absolutely.
Studied, the booby traps, and she went.
Yeah,
that last dream and went after him.
I will say why. Yeah, she goes after him, and she really, I mean, she shows it to him and proves it right, at least at that time. And we have the Bob Shea endings, which are what they are. But I do always like
Listen,
calling out.
Man, you can't fault Bob Shea, okay? He's just he was trying to keep it. He's trying to get his little studio off the ground. He had a hit on his hands. He didn't know what to do. He had to keep it alive. So sure, a doll gets sucked through a window. Whatever, it's fine.
That's all it is. It's that.
Yeah.
Like I think for me the sillier part, and there's one I laughed at this moment of this watch, is why in their medicine cabinet do they have these stay awake pills?
Yeah. Like
what kind of speed was her mom running?
I always figured it was because of the. I always figured because in some ways, like the parents, like they were having difficulty sleeping in their own right, not because they were dreaming about Freddy, but because of
I was thinking John Saxon was just like doing
that's a little more
because he's constantly always working, and she's like to kind of be away from sleeping, and Marge is always drinking to kind of like not be fully awake, and
she's a capital A alcoholic,
right? Right. So so it's just like what they've done is like literally coming down to everyone, which is why I wish some of those deleted scenes had stayed in the film, because I have that double VHS tape still for that came out like '96, where the one is like the remastered movie, and then the second tape is like 25 minutes of deleted scenes.
Oh wow!
A lot of fans have still never seen. The only one that people know the most is like the whole thing with the siblings, and that
I do know. I've seen those.
Yeah, I've seen
there is a ton more that people like, and it goes from start to finish of where it would have been. Like more scenes with Nancy and Rod talking in the jail. One of my favorites is when Nancy is in her final dream, and she, she's like, "Come on, Cougar, follow me," and then she jumps off that fire. And then she lands in her yard. Well, in the middle of that, there's a cut scene where she's literally falling from 1,000 feet.
Oh shit!
And she's just kind of like falling there. It's almost like a dreamlike thing. You don't really see what's happening, and then you kind of see like almost like mist coming up. But you realize it's actually clouds, and it's like once the clouds clear and she's in darkness, she sees that she's like 1,000 feet in the air, and then she lands in her yard. And it was kind of Wes's idea, because they used to say like, or if you fall from a great height in your dream and you land, you'll die for real.
Yeah.
Whole point of that was saying like,
Matrix.
Well, the whole point of that was saying like, well, no, that actually won't kill you because there's something else in your dream that's going to kill you, which was Freddy Krueger.
Interesting.
Nice. So it's kind of like a cool, that's one of my favorite deleted scenes that got cut. And
I want to get my hands on some of these to.
Yeah, I've had that for years. Like it's hard to kind of find. Well, they've never put it on disc, which I've never. Well, I always say Nightmare always gets like the shaft when it comes to.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it.
4K,
yeah, we've been complaining like why hasn't Shout Factory got in and done a big release?
Where's that? Yeah. Where's that treatment that Child's Play just got and Halloween just got from Shout Factory?
Right.
These beautiful 4K, cleaned up, slip covers, all of them. Or it's not. Or that big Friday the 13th box set.
Oh, the Friday the 13th one is gorgeous.
I love that one.
I almost bought the Nightmare box set. Like you could buy like Etsy. People have made pretty nice mimics. I've almost bought it for my own collecting purposes, but
the minute you do that is when they'll release the one like
right.
Yeah. Although I am happy that I did buy, already revealed I buy bootleg stuff. I did buy Hush a while ago from one of those sellers, one of those E-Crater sellers, the Hush, the Netflix Mike Flanagan movie.
Yeah.
And this week on Twitter, people was going around, it's been removed from Netflix, blah, blah, it's not. And I'm
really?
Glad I own that one, because that's a great horror movie.
that's why I love being a physical media collector. I mean, you just
Absolutely.
never know when these movies is gonna vanish. So like, people was like, nobody buys movies anymore. Like, I know
We
plenty
are.
that still buy these movies. So there's just no way I could like not have. Like, 'cause I still have all my Nightmare VHS except for part 2. I need that one. I need to get my hands on a part 2, but I have them all on VHS.
Well, it's like I just bought the Arrow release of the Warriors because for a long time you couldn't find the original cut. There was only that director's cut where they had like spliced in the kind of weird segues with like comic book
comics, but
panels and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And like the regular original version just wasn't available anywhere. And like,
Mhm.
you know,
You
it's
gotta pick it up.
But now it's available on Arrow, because I actually might pick that up because I
yeah.
want that original one too.
Yeah.
Because I've
Yeah,
only
that was
ever
a
seen
really
the
nice
original
they had a
one
nice
on
really
TV.
nice little box set.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to get that because I love like I've only ever seen the like the original cut version on like IFC, and
Yeah.
I own the director's cut, so that's the only
Yeah.
one that I watch the most. But yeah, I love because at the end they just keep walking, and the other one cut, you see them walking all the way down to the end of the beach.
Hey,
The brand.
Anthony, I don't mean to cut off. I feel like I'll be getting a crazy amount of feedback when you're talking. Like it's almost like an extra like whisper in. Is your mic moving or anything?
I don't think so.
Do you hear that, Brian? Have you heard?
Yeah, I can hear it. I know what
Okay.
you're talking about.
Maybe it was kind of like leaning off to the side. Maybe when I was moving or
Oh,
something.
that's
Maybe I'll just kind of keep it like on my shoulder here and just kind
that
of
seems to be
have it out.
better. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh no,
cut
you're
us
good.
off
Yeah,
here.
I don't want to cause all that extra noise. Yeah, it was just kind of.
So,
These are new. I actually just got these, so I just kind of. I used to have like what you had, but I ended up getting these headphones because those are kind of they're just
no worries. I don't think it
smaller,
got
so it's
too
one of the
bad.
bigger ones.
I don't think it got too bad, and but I was starting to really hear that pickup. So anyway, back to talking because I don't feel like cutting any of this. So we're gonna leave it in.
We're gonna burn through that. We're just gonna blaze on past.
But no, I mean you gotta. The point is, I'm dying for a full Nightmare series 4K as well, or even just
Even
a
if it
different
means
Blu-ray.
I end up with 2 Blu-rays of Freddy vs. Jason, I'll take it.
Oh,
Well,
I
you know
don't
what?
care. Oh yeah, I
You know what I
definitely will
had?
do that.
You know what I had for the longest time, and I actually thought they were great copies of it. The Walmart 4-pack, Volume 1, Volume 2 Nightmare movies. They were including Freddy vs.
Oh yeah,
Jason.
that had like
Oh, I know what you're
the like
talking
four
about.
on,
Four
like they were kind
frame.
of done in the square style. Yeah,
Honestly, clean, good transfers. You get both 4:3 and widescreen options. Just after 20 years or whatever having them,
I'm still living
one of the
off my
discs
over here.
stopped
I'm still living
playing.
off my old school box set.
I
Like
see
I'm
that
still.
behind you.
Oh yeah, I got mine. I got mine at like FYE when it first, like what, back in 2001. It was like
Oh yeah, I
100.
was definitely early. I know it's been at least over 20 years because me and my wife were
I
only
got
dating when
I
we
got
bought
this
it.
one.
Oh yeah.
See, I think I got it. It was $169 when I bought it, and like now you can get it for like $20.
Oh, I know, it's
Yeah.
brutal. Oh, there's so much stuff like that like
Yeah.
I get so mad when I see how cheap stuff is that I paid for. Like I was paying $90 a season for The Sopranos when it was coming out. Now you can get like the whole series for $50. You know.
Right. Oh man,
Brian,
yeah.
all those Soprano seasons are a Goodwill around the corner for me for
Oh
like
yeah, you can get them even cheaper. I know it.
Oh yeah. See,
That's
that's why I'm
because
even
everybody in
surprised
New
that.
Jersey bought them. Like everybody owned those.
Well, I'm even surprised that Nightmare didn't even just get a release of the first film in 4K. Like I know Halloween before the
Yeah.
box set even came out, just had its
There was
own
one,
4K.
yeah.
Like that did. I think Texas Chainsaw did.
That has one now. A
you
lot
know.
of these horror that your top 20 horrors are having your 4K releases, and for
Right.
some reason that Craven estate just can't.
And it's a shame because this is the legacy. This is the era of legacy characters. We need Heather Langenkamp back on screen. Like
So I was actually gonna
yesterday.
like so we talk. We all know that this movie and this story so well, and so do our listeners. I was gonna ask you guys about that, right? Like, it's interesting. I know Craven's no longer, with us and everything. So, but it's interesting. There is no, you know, that direct to legacy sequel nightmare movie that deals with Nancy, and like I could I could see in my head whether it works or not, someone being like, that's the old Thompson house, and you just see the bars on the window, the bars
Right.
on the house still, and but it's 30 years later or whatever. I don't know if I want that movie, but I'm surprised that movie doesn't exist.
I am too. Like I mean, I'm one of the ones. I've been such a huge champion to bring, Nancy Thompson back, to the silver screen because she's my all-time favorite heroine since I was the age of 5. Before I even knew what a heroine was or a final girl was, like it was Nancy Thompson. I loved her in that film because she was strong. She went after the bad guy. She like stood like that final scene with Freddy where she just basically says, you're nothing, you're shit, and just turns her back on him. And just that was my impression of what a heroine is supposed to do or a final girl is supposed to do, and to like her to come back in part 3 and be just as strong, and with New Nightmare, which was Wes's way of bringing Nancy back to life with that
It's my
final,
favorite.
I love you too, Daddy. That was his way of bringing her back to life without actually, blatantly just saying like, boom,
She's
she was
Nancy.
back. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
back. Because for me, New Nightmare, I feel like the moment that film starts, we are watching Nancy Thompson. Even though it's Heather Langenkamp, but we are watching Nancy Thompson because that's when Wes has begun writing these
That's how
stories.
it feels.
That's how we watch it. So if we had seen Heather
Well, right.
Langenkamp maybe
If
a
you
week
buy into
before
the
this,
world of the
it would
movie
have been
where
different.
he is controlling the reality by writing,
Right.
When he starts writing, that's when she starts being Nancy. Like that makes
And
sense.
she
to me.
does act like Nancy. She gets her gray streak. She is that. I mean, it's
She's
such
She
a
does
good movie.
screw your pass. I mean, come on.
She's very like weary. She's very like kind of like in tune and like very caution or has this caution on his shoulder at this point, like how Nancy does. Like Chase has scratches on his fingers where in the real world you'd be like, oh man, like what'd you do? Might have like he said, might have cut on that glass, but she's like, where'd you get that? It's more like those almost look like scratches, like Freddy scratches. Like you could tell like that's where she was going. And so, it's like if we had seen Heather Langenkamp a week before, as we, the audience, saw the movie started, we would have saw a different Heather Langenkamp. But this is Nancy is either slowly, like gradually becoming Nancy Thompson throughout this entire film. So that's how I've always looked at it. That she was just still there.
She's still Nancy.
So if they brought it back legacy sequel style, if we're talking about that, would you like it to be like Halloween? Like we're gonna start from this is a direct sequel to the first movie only, and we're gonna forget about everything else?
That's how.
Or you want it more Chucky style, where like get me somebody who can write it and bring it all together.
Everything's together, and maybe you get Mark Patton in this movie, and
Lisa Wilcox come, or something. I've written my own, like, as a writer, when I was trying to get my chops going before I could really write, there was a time I didn't think I could ever write a book. I said, how can I write a story that long? Now that's all I do. So I would write fan fiction. I said, well, let me start with stories that I know, stories that I've always wanted to see. So of course it was like with Nightmare. So I was kind of doing my own Nightmare sequels. And the one I have, my big one, is called After the Nightmare, and it basically picks up right where it ends with part 1, where you hear Nancy saying, I take back every bit of energy I gave you, you're nothing, you're shit. And then the whole scene of what happens in the car, and then she wakes up on the couch downstairs as the police are going through her house. So like that last part was her like this last nightmare that she had, and then it goes on, and it like the way I had it was like I used some of the stuff that they use from the Innovative Comics, where she gets put in the institution by her father, but in my story she actually meets Chris Higgins, because in part 3 Chris Higgins kind of went a little off the rails after dealing with Jason, and they become friends. And like she's one of the people that believes Nancy because of what she's been through, and that kind of relates to Freddy versus Jason later on. You know what I mean?
That's some really
Yeah,
fun
I like
fanfic
that.
you got going on.
Stuff like that. And once
Yeah.
she gets out, she doesn't go back to Springwood. She ends up living with her aunt, and she meets a guy that's in the asylum with her who has like kind of like bipolar issues, but they weren't really talking about that back then, so they didn't really know too much what was wrong with them. And but him and Nancy connect, even though he hasn't had anything strange like that happen to him. He believes her like fully because she said it, and they just kind of grow close, and they grow up together, and she's going to school, and he ends up relapsing, goes back to the asylum, and he doesn't want to see her until she's better. But around that time, that's when Nightmare 3 is going on, and she accepts the job at Western Hills, and by the time he's out, she's dead already. So it kind of leaves off where he kind of picks up where she left off, but she visits him in his dreams because she's the guardian of the good dreams. And then it goes all the way through to like New Nightmare, to where it's gray for a long time, because that's when in the real world Wes Craven is writing Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And then the moment that Heather Langenkamp says, I love you too, Daddy, he hears a knock on his door, and it's pouring down rain at this point, because it had been hitting for rain for months, but it never would rain. But on that night it rained. He opens his door, and it's Nancy, and she's alive because Heather Langenkamp has accepted playing her in the real world. It brought her back to life in the fictional world. And then she explains everything that happened. She has visions of like being this woman Heather and having a son. It kind of slowly fades, but she still remembers being the guardian of the good dreams and this world that she created to help all the souls that Freddy has, killed. But she's alive, but she's a little bit more than human. So when she dreams, she's still kind of the guardian. She still like kind of protects them when she does sleep, and still creates this world and keeps them protected. And then it jumps to 20 years later, and it's in the future, and she's older, and they've moved back to Springwood, and she starts not teaching, but she's a counselor at a Springwood High. And there's a young girl who is having these weird dreams, and she's having some issues, and obviously Nancy's kind of suspicious. And then once she kind of realizes who this girl is, it starts to make sense, because this girl is the granddaughter of Kincaid, who had a daughter.
That's a good callback there.
A daughter that he didn't know about. So when he was a teenager, he had basically a girlfriend. They did the deed. She was pregnant. When she found out she was pregnant, her mother moved them away.
No, man, this.
I definitely like the idea of like a fantasy, like expanding the fantasy element of it somehow, and like
your story
I don't know if we can ever without a like creative force like a Don Mancini, somebody who like really takes tight control of the reins. I don't know if we can ever hope for something as interconnected as all that.
Right.
But I would definitely enjoy seeing them expand a little bit on the like fantasy elements and maybe expand the world in that way.
I know before I'm one of the people too that would think I remember me and Deandra went back and forth on this before we had met each other through podcasting and all this stuff. The way to do that, in my opinion, is treat Freddy as that, almost in the New Nightmare way, as this entity, and you could pass it along. And then I think have introductions, and probably even handle it how they handled that the Candyman. I don't like calling it a remake, but follow up where
it's a legacy sequel.
It's a legacy.
Yeah, I call it. Yeah, it's pretty much a direct sequel to the first film.
And it's there, and the story, but we don't need to. You could have these hints and nods to everything that happened prior, but we could also tell its own thing. And I think Nightmare might lend it. I think Nightmare could lend itself a good way like that, because you could be like, this is Fred Krueger, but it's maybe not the Fred Krueger you knew. But it's an evil entity. I don't know. That's how I've thought of it. She did make some good points. By that would never work. This was through TikToking back and forth when I TikToked for like a month. Um, but um, but back to the original movie, because I did, like I said, I did have a few notes of just to kind of highlight or some things that I noticed. Is one thing I loved about this movie, and I love this movie as a whole, but I've always noticed and loved how Nancy in the dream, when she goes to visit Rod in the jail cell, but before she does it in real life, it gives us a look to almost what Dream Warriors could become, of how like these dreams all get interconnected, even though,
Right.
you know, part of it is just seeing dead Tina, like another version of dead Tina. Um, you know, and there's those little touches, like even the comedic parts of Freddy in those early dreams, like the hallway with
Ooh.
the dead Tina bag and the, you know, the hall monitor and the sweater, like that's not the bag. That's the probably scariest shot.
That's a terrifying scene. Her in the like
Uh,
her hand running down the body bag. It's just terrifying.
but the girl in the Freddy sweater, before it's even memorable iconography, right? Like before it's even like, it's the first movie, it's the lower budget movie.
Well,
It's
it's like
there,
you've seen it in the movie enough to like when you see it
but
on that girl,
but
it definitely feels out of
it's a
place.
joke.
Like,
It's
yeah,
it's Freddy. Like I view that as in these dreams of like this this is Freddy's writing. This is his
yeah.
joke.
It's Freddy like
Yeah.
pranking her, like,
Yeah,
like
like haha,
Yeah.
I'm screwing with you. And that humor's still there. And I think my point of this little word vomit I'm having right now is like those touches here and there of her running to the jail cell, but interacting with Rod, not even like we all then see that in Dream Warriors to a bigger extent, obviously, where she's like, we should all share our dreams. But then also the Freddy humor and like some of what Wes wanted is there, and then obviously, like you said, you have MTV Freddy eventually, and we all know that's what we're not talking about. I just love it. I mean, there's just so many of those moments, and
I realized on this watch, and maybe it's something that is always like I'm always thinking about, but I'm like, what? How did Rod get involved with these people? Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, what's going on with Rod? How is like it's so
Rod's the
funny to me.
standout member that
It's so funny to me that when he comes in, he like tackles Johnny Depp. They're like roughhousing. He's all friendly, and then like 2 seconds later, he pulls a knife on him. Like Johnny Depp says like one thing, and Rod's like, "What? I'll kill you."
He's like
Johnny,
that look on his face.
yeah, and they're all like goody two shoe kids.
Yeah, like how did
And that's what I
Rod even
like. Yeah,
like?
they're just like
Tina's got a
standard
thing for bad
teenagers.
boys, I guess, but like Jesus.
He's not a bad guy, Mom. He's or Dad. He's just my friend, and he's like reading his rap sheet. He's like,
Yeah.
few gang drug busts, like, because you know, yeah, good kid. And I'm like, as an adult, although you know, her father is just not believing her and gaslighting completely wrong in the sense. I'm kind of like,
Right.
he's not
Oh,
wrong,
some
Nance. Like,
just
you
some of the
shouldn't be hanging
worst
out with this guy.
parenting. There's just some of the worst parenting in this movie. I think it might have been Deandra put up a tweet about who's the worst parent in the Nightmare franchise, and I feel like on a scale of who could have done the most and who did the least, you got to put John Saxon pretty high on the list. Like he really could have nipped this in the bud with a little bit of effort and maybe
Right.
saved a couple lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
He owns
That's
it though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, in 3, we at least know that he he feels some guilt.
yeah. But that's what I love about Freddy though. He can like I said, he can kill you probably right away in your dream. He likes to play with you. Like a mouse, like a
It's a
cat
cat.
playing with
It's a cat
with
with
the
a toy.
mouse, and
Yeah.
just, the whole thing with Tina where like, his arms are stretching, this is God, and then he chases her, and then like next cut, he's like right in front of her, and then she has to run back the other. I mean, he could have like did, you know what I mean? He just,
Well,
I think
he was
what
having fun.
I always felt like he had to kind of build up to it. It's kind of like the thing you see a little bit of
Freddy
in
versus
Freddy versus
Jason.
Jason where
Yeah.
he can't go. So it's like he has to get the victim scared enough that like he can finally strike and it'll work. If he tries to pull the trigger too early, it like won't take.
I've
He might
always
fuck
liked
him
that
up,
lore.
or he might like maybe just gives them like an arrhythmia, and they wake up with like some heart palpitations. They didn't quite die, but he's getting close. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I always liked that lore too, Brian. Because it builds to it, right? And but I looking at the movie or all of them too is these aren't the kids' dreams either. It's Freddy's tale that they get to live in because other than that, what other dream? What I look at it as if the person's gonna there and kill me, it's their world. They're in control at the moment, not me.
Yeah, and he's cruel too. I mean, not just the fact that he kills you, but just like the stuff that he does, and like how he kind of like mocks you, and like in the first one where Nancy's stuck on a sticky stair, and she has like Tina's like face on him. He's like, Nancy, help me, please, and then he rips it. I mean, stuff like
great.
that, and even going. I said one of my favorite moments is actually with him. How he does that is actually in part 3, where how the opening scene is with Kristen and her mom, and after her mom comes home from her date, and Kristen's playing the music all loud, and her mom's kind of like really dismissive, like, you're gonna wake up the neighbors, and just being just being real grouchy with her and like really short. And then later on, when Kristen thinks that she's kind of had this long nightmare, like and her mom comes back, her mom's kind of acting very more supportive, and but kind of like the way Kristen wished that conversation had gone, and Freddie knows that because he's up there. So like, now her mom's very like, we think like, okay, her mom actually might stay with her, like, might send her date home. She's like, I'm just gonna stay with you. And then right when she thinks that, Freddie comes, snatches the mom, and has the mom, kind of like
It's
berating her.
brilliant.
You know what I mean? It's just like those little things right there. I feel like makes him much more. It gives him much more depth than
it's
like
brilliant.
I said. That's why I say I don't really think of it too much as a slasher, because there's just so much more like a methodical method to all his madness and like what he's doing, and
and I really feel like that speaks to why Nightmare comes out of the gate so strong. Like,
right.
The Friday the 13th movies don't really fully form into what they're going to be for like.
They're not. They're not.
Maybe by the fourth one, they're kind of starting to get a handle on it. But right out of the gate, it's like it's not a fully formed idea in the way that it's just a well executed copy of something we've seen before. It's a new idea, and it's also like
it looks
fully ready to
right.
go. It's like all the way thought out and all the way, and it's just a very impressive, impressive feat from Wes.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge point, Brian. Because of that, like, what are some of your like favorite, I guess, favorite moment for that from whatever in a nightmare? You kind of just mentioned one, Anthony, and for me it is that hallway body drag scene of just how haunting it all is, how visually scary that moment is. I mean, there's
her arm like flaps when he like just like like that. It's like so dead, like it's a dead. She's just so lifeless. It's like,
she's dead. You watched her die, and now they're dealing with it, and that's what's scary.
Well, and like the kind of disrespect of the corpse too. Like there's that element too. It's like not only is that your friend and she's dead, but look at the way he just like drags her around like an old bag of trash, and like she's leaking blood onto the floor, and he's just leaving a trail. Just like it's just so unsettling.
Yeah, that's for me the one that works the most. There's obviously cooler shit like it's in our intro of this show.
Yeah, I'll take it, Joe. Don't worry. I'll go lowbrow, and I'll take the blood fountain as like just one of the most iconic horror.
It's amazing.
I remember a friend of mine describing this to me before I had seen it, and I had seen Interview with a Vampire, and there's a scene in Interview with a Vampire where they cut Tom Cruise's throat, and he's like bleeding out, and there's this like huge puddle of blood, and it keeps creeping out towards the end, and it's like a lot of blood, and it's really dark, and I was like, man, And I remember my friend telling me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've seen." It's like, no, you don't understand. When I say a lot of blood, and then I finally saw Nightmare, and I was like, "Oh yeah, so you mean like an unreal, like a fantasy amount of
Yeah,
blood?" But it's also the sharp contrast of like you've got the horror of him getting sucked in and the blood coming out, and then the kind of like crazy disorientation of the room kind of moving and the blood shifting, and then
Which was an
the
accident.
the comedy
yeah.
of like maybe the funniest line in the whole movie, like following that up where they're like, "But he should have brought a bucket." It's
Oh
like
yeah, you
that
need
is
a
just
mop.
the
It's like you
that
need
is
a
like
mop.
the it's terrifying, and then it's mind bending, and then it's like hilarious gallows humor. It's just got like
Hmm.
that whole sequence has everything.
And I
Yeah,
love
it
that
wasn't
I love
just
that you
a
never know what
master at the
happened to
peak.
like Glenn either. Like you just don't know exactly what happened to him.
No,
Like
and
you know.
that happens kind of twice in this movie, which I absolutely like. Like I think is so great. Glenn's obviously the big one, right? You have no idea
Hmm.
how his dream went, what that pool represents.
Right.
Um, but Nancy in the and I think shows restraint as a filmmaker, and it gives a better tale. Is Nancy in the sleep study? You know when she
Oh
what was
yeah.
it? She
She burns
burnt
her arm, or
no.
she pulls
She brings the
She
hat
bring
out.
and the
she
hat
brings the
through.
hat
That's
out.
when
She
she brings
doesn't
the
burn.
hat through. Yeah,
Brings out.
she
Right.
burns her arm in school.
We don't see the hat encounter,
Right. That's the only dream of
and
hers we never see.
I want you wonder what was that dream? What was that encounter? Because that gives her not only the idea, but somewhat of that strength to go and do what she needs to do afterwards. Of like, I could get back at this guy. He can't just burn. Like I burned
Yeah.
myself, but I could actually take shit from him.
Mhm.
Well, and
Well,
that's
he
the
got
first
he
time
got
we
he got
see.
close to her because in that dream when she's in the bed, she's like, like he's choking her. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
he's that close. He's that close because before,
Well,
like
and we
he's getting
see
close
what's
to his burn, but he's that
happening.
close to her now.
Yeah.
That's one of the first times we see what's happening in the real world while a dream is going on.
Yep.
And that's something I
Right.
think they get into more. Like you talk about, we don't know what happens to Glenn. I feel like had that death happened in a later Nightmare movie, you'd have seen that he was just like laying in bed and like choked on a cheese poof or something. But, we're
Like
seeing,
Freddy, like cut a
right,
circle in him or something,
drawn us, yeah, but like because they would do in the later ones, they would do like
like a
whatever
big
the crazy dream
cartoon
that's happening, and then you see the
pencil.
real world,
Oh
and the
yeah.
person, the girl is getting sucked, into a paper thin, but in the real world she just has an asthma attack
Yeah.
and
So
dies.
Right.
I love that.
So I do like
That's
the ambiguity of the first
yeah,
movie is
and
they
that's what
don't
Yeah.
hold your hand
that's what
through
makes it.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
I not as much anymore, but like get sleep paralysis and suffer sleep paralysis pretty
Oof.
more than not. I mean, not frequently anymore, but I have. And how she's acting in that sleep study, not so much the wailing, but the twitching of the eyes and moving and this. When my wife and I first started dating, I had gotten paralysis, and she was the only person ever had fallen asleep next to that saw that, and she had no idea. She was like, "Your eyes were like flipping back, and you were,
Yeah.
because you're trying to fight. The way it works, you're trying to fight out of what's going on." And uh, I had never been giving I had never been given that perspective from someone that was there,
Right.
Right, no
right?
one had
Right
ever
there.
bore witness to that.
Right.
Because when you're going through it, when you wake up, at least my experience, you're just completely fine
Yeah.
as you fell asleep still. So seeing that on screen as Nance, like, and the way Nance represents is very similar to sleep paralysis episode.
I've had it before. Like I had it a lot as a kid, and then as I got older, it like faded off. Last
Yeah.
time I had it, I know I had it was like 10 years ago, like
Yeah, I had a lot
2013.
from
Uh,
16 to about 23, and then I'm 32 now, and I mean, I once or twice a year, nothing crazy, nothing, it's not frequent, and I know what it is,
yeah,
but,
it's been a
uh,
long time, but yeah, just not being able to. Oh yeah,
oh,
I
it's terrifying,
know
but
that
that's
feeling.
sleep, and that's that type of fear that this movie gets into, and those
Hmm.
creatures,
That's why I say it's more visceral because everybody knows what it feels like to have a nightmare or have like
mm,
or I mean, some people. I mean, there's some people I know that they said they never had sleep paralysis, so some people can't really identify with that. But
Oh,
the
but a
people that
night terror, a
can, but a
nightmare.
night terror,
Sure.
nightmare, falling asleep when you don't want to fall asleep because you're scared of like a dream that you're gonna have. Like as a kid, I would get scared sometimes, and I would like go to sleep for some reason. Like a dark thought would come in my head, and I was like, I'm scared this will turn into a nightmare.
Mhm.
Like as a kid, you're thinking that, and I feel like everybody can identify with that on some level, and that's why I feel like this film hits, stronger and has a deeper meaning and a deeper message because of that.
Absolutely. So
That's why I feel
no,
like
I
having a
love.
character like Nancy was very relevant for this, not having like sad to say, like a Laurie Strode type character for this
No,
film. Like
I
it just wouldn't have worked. Like she had to match his dark demonic energy with her light energy, and they just had to like mesh, but they had to meet on the same battle.
and Laurie Strode, right, and other slash final girls of this time, especially, they don't. It's no shade to those characters and people of those characters. They're never really doing anything to defeat the character. They're kind
Right.
of just getting. They're kind of winning by the day because of circumstance.
Right, because
So
they kind of like they happen to survive, like
yeah,
and whereas Nancy she made sure she survived by the thing, like I
bro,
said, setting up
she
the
took a.
booby traps
I'll
and
say she took a book out on booby traps and survival guides and was like, "I'm ready." Like
Yeah, like she better watch out. Like
what a
the detectives from Seven are going to be looking her up based on her
whoa.
library choices.
One of my favorite one of my favorite parts of Nancy's story in this and uh line reading and acting is when Glenn falls asleep, right? She has her plan and she's like, Glenn, do this, and she wakes up and
She reads in
I've
the riot act, man.
yeah, she does. No, but I'm I don't know. We've probably all been talked like that at some point by a significant other, someone who like cares,
Mhm.
and like
Well, because he disappointed her. He was
that's
supposed to
so
like,
never not represented on screen. Of like you fucking like I could hear being said to me like you fuck what?
Right.
It's like what?
like I asked so little of you, and you couldn't
Yeah,
even manage it.
and like
Right.
and like I can't. I mean, literally, maybe except for Sidney Prescott,
Oh
which
yeah,
is just another Wes Craven character. So I don't
character,
know how
right.
well it
I
counts.
I
I
consider
can't think.
Sydney the Nancy of the '90s. I've
Yeah,
always considered
oh
her the
sure.
Nancy of the '90s.
That's
Well,
what
and
she
Scream
is.
is the nightmare of the '90s. The opening
Right.
scene comes out really strong. It's a fully formed idea that is
Hmm.
well executed. That drops like a bomb and changes the horror landscape. I mean,
Right.
Wes knew what was up.
Yeah,
He crushed it twice.
but
Hmm.
uh, yeah. So yeah, but that's that Nancy Todd. Like that's that palette of like
Yeah, she's
that
strong.
pushback and
She's a strong
uh,
girl. And the fact that she's only 15. I love that she's a 15-year-old
Yeah.
girl in this. She's not like, 17, 18, getting ready to. She's like basically a freshman in high school,
yeah.
that took on this demonic demon. Like, I actually, as a writer, and this is kind of going me more into like the writing I do now, like, Nancy Thompson, I use as a template for
Mm.
my heroines and my heroes, my male heroes. Like she's like the template. Like I use her as a guide of like how I want a character to develop. Obviously, they're
I know.
100% my characters, but that way that
But you
Wes
write them
wrote
with that, like,
her,
what would Nancy do
she do
Yeah,
mentality,
that
right? Like,
yeah.
mentality
put
and
There's
them
a
like
on her
template.
path.
right and
She's
the
the
growth,
skeleton of
Yeah.
who
right
your people are.
and that
Uh,
growth and like so in my mind, and this is kind of a funny thing I saw like years and years ago, like when VH1 used to show like music videos,
mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
I just remember this one thing they were showing like the top however many whatever videos of all time, and Thriller was one of them, and they would have like some of the singers and stuff talk about it, like how it influenced them, and Will Smith had said something about because when he used to do his music videos, how he said in his mind, he said, "I'm always chasing after Thriller. I'm always chasing after that
That's
video." And that
high
when
bar.
I Right, and when he said that, I was like 13 or 14. I didn't really quite understand what he meant by that. So what does
Mhm.
it mean he's chasing after that? Like he's trying to like mimic Thriller, like he wants to do something scary. Like I mean, that's just where my mind was going.
Sure.
But it wasn't until I got older until I realized what he meant. Because when I would start writing my horror stories, I'm chasing after Nightmare, the
Yeah.
first Nightmares, because I the way I write, I want people to feel that same like kind of scare, that same kind of high that I felt when I first watched Nightmare on Elm Street. I want them to feel that as they're reading one of my horror stories. So I'm in my mind, I'm chasing after that same high to kind of reflect into what I'm writing.
Very great.
So that's
Excellent.
a lot of reasons why I use her as a template, and that's why I love fantasy horror. And I love horror that doesn't get, like I said, horror can obviously always have its fun moments. Like there's laughing, even in Nightmare with how
The
they're
coffee pot.
the coffee pot and like what was it when Rod slips Glenn that messed up tape and he's talking to his mom like he said I think there's been an accident out front and he's like oh, I think the neighbors are fighting next door
Yeah.
because like all this stuff is going. No, I mean you couldn't have those fun moments, but I really loved the significance of those early Nightmare films where it was just dark,
Yeah.
very without the MTV Freddy element involved, because I just love Dark Freddy. I love what the template that Wes Craven created.
Dark Freddy's the best Freddy.
But that, so that's what I chase. I don't want my stories to get to that hokey stage where you're reading. It's like, well, this is like really more funny. Like that I'm
Yeah,
like,
you want to write and say like this is a hard horror character, and if there's a humor there, the humor's in the horror and what maybe the thing
right,
they're doing, then
right,
setting up a punchline. And
right,
that's kind of, and I think that's like, talking about Freddy in this first movie and, getting back is like, with that humor aspect, you said it like, it's not there. It's sick that is what he's getting enjoyment out messing with the people around them, but it's
right,
not to make the audience laugh as it does in the other movies,
right,
right? Like it doesn't happen in a Nightmare, but like doing some sort of dismember it and playing with the body or whatever or this and that
mm,
is for the audience to also laugh at in movies like that, compared to just being disturbed because that's what the character's into. And that's what
right.
Freddy in this first one is, like I said, cat and mouse. So yeah, I
Yeah,
love that's
definitely.
in your writing and the bones of Nightmare and Nancy and this horror where you're at and your
Wes is my
characters.
spirit animal. He's my spirit animal.
Your
Like I said,
spirit animal.
he was the one I really wish I could have, because I've been going to horror cons since 2007. So
Uh-huh.
I've been to about 60 cons,
Oh
and
Man,
wow.
he was one person that, because I got to meet Heather like the first show I went to, and
sure.
obviously I met her several others, and just if you've seen the doc, we've become like
Yeah.
for friends and such, but Wes was just one that, and if I had met him, I wouldn't wanted to talk to him about the movies. Like I've watched every interview he's pretty much ever done. Like, I didn't want to say, "Oh, what was it like filming Nightmare on Elm Street?" I mean, because I've
You
seen that.
know the
No,
answer.
I've seen that. Like, I wanted to pick his brain about writing. I wanted to really delve into like,
Someone
when
like
you
him would have loved
writing those
that.
characters, and when you're writing this particular, like, what does it for you symbolically mean
Mhm.
for you, as opposed to like me as an audience member looking at it. How do you come up with these ideas for it to mean or to have this meaning
Mhm.
and to develop into something later? Stuff like I would have wanted to pick his brain about stuff like that.
Sure.
Had I gotten a chance to.
No, I feel like someone like him and I know I've watched my fair share of interviews too, like Orwell, and
Hmm.
would have loved a question and answers like that comparatively to just so how was it making a movie, or
Yeah.
so Red Eye, I love it. Were you bummed
Oh
that
yeah.
it didn't do as well, and like
Yeah.
you
And
don't
I
want to
love
talk
Red
about,
Eye.
but yeah, Red
I
Eye is
love
great.
Red Eye.
Yeah.
Definitely love Red Eye.
Red Eye's good.
Yeah, he was just a really good filmmaker. I wish we could see his real version of Cursed.
I
Like
know. Oh,
that is not a good movie. Like I think is or and same with like My Soul to Take, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
could we get the actual Wes Craven version of those movies and not the studio chopped up versions?
Right. They always came after his films. That's what he always talked about.
Yeah.
They always came after his movies, and it's like such a disservice. Like it's art. Like you can't
Mm-hmm.
put a stopping block on art. Like if
Mm-hmm.
it's going to offend you, don't watch it.
Sure.
That, or don't look at it. You can have that choice of not looking at it, but because it's just out there, I don't feel like you have a right to
I
just say no just because it's
Well, and I
out
feel like they
I
weren't even concerned with like censoring it in that way. They're more
yeah.
like worried about what's the way we can make it the most profitable. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? If they
Yeah, and
thought making it more violent, they'd probably do that. You know
I
what I mean?
think
They just want
what's
whatever makes the
I
most money.
think what's
there.
wrong in with the Wes Craven end of that too, with it being art or it is art, but being cut up for art is at that stage in his career for a lot of these movies, like he should have earned the respect to be like, no, here's your vision, we're gonna do it, and like we'll be more collaborative with you instead of hire you as a gun, change the movie, and that's it. Because that's what happened later in his career a lot, right?
Right.
So it's like the guy gave us People from Under the Stairs,
Mm.
like you know,
One of
and
my top favorites. I love
it's
that film.
uh,
Oh, Serpent in the Rainbow.
I was just gonna bring up
Ooh,
Serpent in
yes,
the
Surfing on
Rainbow.
the
So like
Rainbow.
I'm naming the two not or like Serpent in the Rainbow, and we couldn't trust him. You couldn't trust
Right.
him with these later projects. Because even something it's like Vampire in Brooklyn, it's like okay, you're trying to do comedic, and it's a fun movie. Don't
I love,
like
I love it.
yeah, it's
I love it. I love it. It's
making
so
my mom
fun.
rent that at the age of like 7 because I love the Nutty Professor.
Oh
You
man,
know, and Doctor Do, and it's like she's like, "You sure?" And it's like, "Yeah, it's Eddie Murphy." And she's like, "Okay," and
that movie's
uh,
so great.
yeah, but that's Wes Craven's like range.
Right. And yeah, they should,
Uh,
like you said, they should have trusted him to
so I love that. I
do
actually
what
do
he
love
do.
that moment in Now I'm just getting off topic. I love that moment in New Nightmare where he's like self-reflective. I'm gonna blank on the name, and Nancy's like, not Nancy, when Heather's like, oh, well, Wes isn't even doing horror movies anymore. He's
Oh
doing
yeah.
to like that one Meryl Streep movie he directed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Music of the Heart.
Yes, Music
That
of the
was
Heart.
in, what was that,
It was
99?
that
That one
was
came
later.
out.
Oh, my
Yeah, that was
apologies. I
later.
was getting my timeline.
Hmm.
But she was just
Yeah.
referring like what he wanted to do almost.
Right. He's like, I thought West stopped doing horror
Yeah,
movies.
sorry, I can't always think Music of the Heart's earlier. That's way
Yeah,
off.
that.
Um,
Which actually had bought that. That was one of my buys. I think was it last year, or the year before, and I finally sat down and watched this. Actually, a really
well, I
good
believe it.
movie, really good
Yeah, the
drama.
man's a talented director. I
Yeah,
believe it
it's
too.
Yeah,
it's
Absolutely.
Ridley Scott. He's a Ridley Scott esque. It's like this man wasn't just Alien. He made Thelma and Louise.
right.
Right.
So many like good things,
Uh,
and
so but Anthony, so we talked a lot of Nightmare. Anything of like the movie or Freddy or any of this that hey, we haven't touched on or brought up that you really wanted to like talk about today?
um, well, no, well, it definitely kind of hit on my, just kind of like my perception of it not being
Sure, yeah, that's what I.
like a slasher.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm very glad you mentioned that
We
because
want to get that message out to the world. We support
yeah,
that. That's a
we support it.
Flyover endorsed
Yeah.
point now.
but like I said,
Stamp it.
I don't blast anyone that comes and said, well, I think it is a slasher, because I'm not going to be the person that says no, because
Sure, I'll
it's how you
We
perceive
don't
no,
argue opinion around here.
right?
and
It's how
I'll
you
call it
perceive
a
it,
We'll
I'll call it
support, but I'm not fighting opinion. I ain't doing that.
I
right?
said I'm
Yeah,
supporting it, and I could call it a slasher out of instinct, but like but you
You can
make
call it
better
a slasher because
points.
that's a parlance that
Yeah,
more common
yeah,
people who are like less deep in the horrors that might know. But if I'm
like
talking
I'm
to
not.
somebody who actually knows horror, we can
That's
get more
where
into it. You know what I
I
mean?
think that's where we're at with it. Like I'm not going to
yeah.
correct my like sister-in-law or what
Yeah, you got normie
whoever
people you work with.
normies. I'm not going to correct
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
normies.
you
I'm just
start
going to
norm.
talking. You start talking to them, and like you see their eyes glaze over because you're starting
well
to hit them with
actually
too much information. We all been there.
well actually but yeah, yeah, Anthony. Anything? Just we mentioned like I know we jumped around in the movie a lot, and a little more untraditional than we normally talk, but I think that's the best way to talk about.
No, and I think we hit a lot
Oh
of good
yeah, I
stuff.
always got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean sometimes that's just the way it happens.
Uh,
Like
Get
the
those
ending
organic,
wise,
natural. We're not repeating talking points here. We're like
nah,
having a
right,
we're having a real discussion about the movie.
right. I've actually always wanted the ending to be because I've seen. I don't. Have you guys seen the extra footage from that double VHS tape? A lot of those deleted scenes and such.
I've seen the stuff
Maybe a
with
couple of them.
I've seen the stuff with the
Okay.
kids, but I truly haven't. I'm having such a hard time recalling. I've seen all the original endings
Okay, yeah. So they
or
got
what was
those
available.
right. So like, other than like some of those earlier
The kids,
like deleted scenes, right? It the ending I wish they had kind of used was the one where you see Nancy and her friends drive off and they're fine,
hmm
and then actually watching Marge get pulled through like she wasn't fine because it's like Nancy had basically kind of ended her own nightmare, but Marge was still in hers because she was like really the one that still couldn't accept the fact that Freddy was like even Donald at that point accept because well he ended up seeing Freddy, but she was like one of the ones who still couldn't quite grasp onto that. And I
So
always
that
felt like that
fear
would
kind
have
of
been
was still
like
holding on. Yeah.
so like
sure.
Nancy was safe, and then but her mother was, because I think a Wes's original ending, everybody was fine. Like she steps off the
That's
porch,
what Wes
waves,
wanted.
and yeah, because he said originally it was just supposed to be one elongated dream,
hmm
and then she steps off the porch and it's day, and
And this was her
but
tale of coming to it and accepting, and but
right,
there's a bookend. I've seen, I've
yeah,
seen that interview, or the many, but yeah, and I do love. I hate that I love the story, but it's just comedically love of they were adding endings on it to I think they were screening it for Paramount, and then like Bob Shea had them attach that one that we got, and that's what got put in. And they went,
but
great, we
yeah,
loved it, and then like Wes was like, what?
right. Right. Because I mean, because I think Wes only wanted to do just the one movie. He just wanted
Mhm.
it to be just that one movie and like that be it. No, which I think was true with all the originals with Freddie, Michael, and Jason. There was never supposed to be another Halloween. There was never supposed to be another Friday the 13th. And there was never supposed to be another Nightmare on Elm Street. But
Well,
Surely it wasn't supposed to be another Friday the 13th because they didn't even use the same. They had to come up with a whole new killer for that one.
right, right,
yeah.
right. So I mean, so I've always imagined like, man, if we only just had that first Nightmare on Elm Street, like how wild that would be. I mean, and just have it be a staple because
It
I
would be like,
consider Freddy and Jason really to be the epitome of the 80s. I don't consider Michael to be the epitome of the 80s because he
no,
was
it's a
only
'70s
yeah, he
horror.
was only 78 and 81, and then he didn't come back until 88, but
Yeah,
Freddy had pretty much dominated, the
it's
80s, and
if
so I feel
sorry,
like that refined. I felt like that refined where
yeah.
Halloween kind of refined the 70s a little bit. I always felt like Nightmare
Oh,
kind
it
of
absolutely
refined
did.
like the 80s because it was so different
And
than
it was a
all the
dead.
other
It
slashers.
was once again not dying, but dying out of the redundancy of let's keep mimicking Halloween for
Yeah,
that
Halloween,
like
5 or 6
right,
years
5, 6
after Halloween,
years.
there'd been so many knockoffs and so
'Cause
many like
right,
what I would
every
say is
holiday had its own movie at that point.
right.
which is a what I'm gonna say is a slasher. But something like the Nightmare, if it was one movie, it would be more of like My Bloody Valentine, right? Where I think
Hmm.
people would kind of be like, "Oh man, this movie's great. I'm shocked it never got a sequel." And
Right,
that's how I find people talk about My Bloody Valentine, at
right.
least.
That's actually in my top five favorite horror films by Bloody Valentine.
Yeah,
I just
it's a
watched
good
it.
So
one.
maybe
I,
that
I
you mentioned
always
that.
me and my
It's
son
great.
always watch it on Valentine's
Oh
Day.
yeah, of course. I have to. That's one of my favorites. And yeah, so I always felt like it refined the 80s because Freddy was a different type. Because they always say like, oh, if there wasn't Halloween, then there wouldn't be Friday the 13th. Would be Nightmare on Elm Street. I said, yeah, there wouldn't be a Friday the 13th, but for
There would be
me,
Nightmare.
there
Yeah, you might
would
still have
there
a
would have been
nightmare.
Nightmare
Yeah.
on Elm Street because that was totally that didn't take any tropes from Halloween at all. It was its own
No,
thing,
no, it's a
and I just felt like it just kind of stood apart,
mhm.
from pretty much a lot of the films that came out in the 80s. Well, horror film wise,
Yeah, I
80s
agree.
wise.
I agree 100%. I That's why I one of the reasons I love this franchise as well. And it stands out. It's unique, even in the silliness. You get these silliness in later sequels. You still get these great explorations of special effects and
Oh yeah.
fun things, and you have this amazing performance all through and through. It's always bringing it.
And that's one thing I love about it too, is that with the way Nightmare goes, it's like the kids were always on each other's sides. It wasn't like there wasn't like a mean girl or a jock guy or somebody who was thinking. It's
That's a
because
great
all
point.
the kids, they felt like they had because
their group of friends already had a psycho in it. They didn't need a mean girl.
Right.
They already had Rod, and he was crazy as fuck.
And he got put in jail real early.
Right. So it's like they kind of had to like band together, and like that was even in the later sequels. Like obviously Dream Warriors. They band together. They weren't because they knew they had to, because this wasn't like I said, because it's not a typical horror film.
No.
It was so different. That's what another thing that I loved about it. It's just it just stands apart so much, and it always brings me back home whenever I can watch a Nightmare on Elm Street. It doesn't matter if I watch 1 through 7. Like it just brings me back home. No
comfort
matter
food.
Which film? It's like you said, comfort food. It's nostalgia. Like as a kid, that's all. Like that's all I would. Now, of course, I watched them out of sequence. Like I didn't watch them. I watched the first one first, and then I think I saw part 6, and then I saw part 5, which I saw part 5 in daycare. Trivia for me. So
amazing.
Yeah, somebody brought it when I was like 6 years old at daycare. We watched the uncut version of Nightmare 5 in daycare. That's true. Hilarious. That is a true story.
Yeah, they were like, "What? It's got a kid in it." They were like,
"It's good for you." Yeah, I don't know who hasn't seen it out of sequence. I saw some of the one. Then the New Nightmare, and then Freddy vs. Jason was the one that really clicked, and then I went back, and so I feel like that's
actually seen New Nightmare first for some reason. So
oh wow,
God only knows.
Yeah, this is a series that probably like a lot of those non-slasher slashers. I won't call this a slasher, but of that genre that have plenty where like it's not. It works it still works if you see it out of sequence, and you could still have that. You could still fall in love with it, not needing to know. And but anyway, yeah, Anthony, I know I don't really have anything else I really need to express about my love for this franchise or want to keep delving. I feel like I could talk for another 3 hours just about Wes Craven and Nightmare. Brian or Anthony, anything else you guys want to, or how we feeling?
No, nothing else for me. I just I want to make sure Anthony got if he's got anything he's working on coming out, I want to give him a chance to plug that. And stuff.
Please
aside
from
that,
plug away.
Anything else going on?
Well, yeah, I've spoken on this. I am a book writer, mostly horror writer. I've written 10 books, working on my 11th.
Congratulations!
Appreciate that. 6 are
writers
published.
Right, just keep working.
Amazon, right? That's all. Watching horror films as I'm writing always inspires me. So.
We could buy your books. At least 6 published. You said 11 going. Buy your books on Amazon.
Yeah, you can buy them on Amazon. All my links to it are pretty much on all my socials. My Twitter,
we'll
Instagram
have
and Facebook. Yeah, it's all.
Yeah,
you can
we'll put all that in the description. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you just go right to my link tree, you just go to the Amazon site. It takes you right there.
Yeah, that'll be down there. And then if I had it up, I was gonna say, if you do want to talk to you, your handle on Twitter is @ANT_lost and horror.
I'm always lost in horror.
You're lost. Ant is lost in horror.
Sure.
And,
well, that goes back to being a kid and always going to the horror section at the video store like every time. Didn't go anywhere else but the horror section.
Just obsessed. There's so many covers that are like burned into my brain.
I know we just ended it, but I forgot to tell Brian. So we're talking about that. You were watching that Snow White movie with Sigourney Weaver
Oh,
the other day.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
picked it up at my second-hand store for $3
Hell
the other day
yeah.
on my birthday because of the cover of the movie store, and we were talking about that. So
It's good.
Nice.
It's well worth $3. You'll get $3
I
out of
It's
watched
dark.
it.
Yeah, that's a dark. Kind of. Well, I guess like the Grimm's fairy tale version of like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Snow
It's a
White
great
story.
Sigourney.
Yeah.
You get a great Sigourney performance. She gets to play a creepy hag and be beautiful. She's great. Love her.
Right.
Love her.
Right.
All right. Well, Anthony, it was a pleasure to have you on. Everyone should go read and check out Anthony's work along
And
with
obviously
the
find Fred
documentary.
Heads. Watch Fred Heads.
Red
I believe
Hills
it's on Tubi right
documentary.
now. Tubi,
Yeah,
Amazon.
Tubi and Amazon Prime, and for all the physical media lovers out there, it's on DVD.
Yeah,
Oh.
baby. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, and also, side note, my book Bloodshed is actually an homage to A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Bloodshed.
But Bloodshed. It doesn't. Well, I'll let you know. It doesn't have anything to do with dreams or a dream demon, but it's more in the way that it's set up. So people who love Nightmare, who know Nightmare, will kind of pick up on the sense. I've had people
You'll pick
come
it
in and they
up.
read it and it's like, oh, I see what you did there. I was like, yeah,
Nice.
it's not blatant,
There you
but
go.
just it's kind of like my.
That's a good bridge. That can be a good bridge
Yeah.
from this episode into the rest of your work. People can kind of just
Yeah.
take a little sidestep. They'll be able to watch from
Get
here.
Bloodshed.
Yeah.
Bloodshed.
It was kind of like a thank you to Wes Craven. It's kind of how I looked at it. Thank you to him.
He certainly
for
deserves
inspiring
it.
me. Absolutely.
Look forward to reading it and checking it all out.
It's awesome.
Well, always a pleasure. And as always, guys, you know where to find us. And stay frightful, everyone. Flyover state of fear.